Welcome to EPG Pathsala. I am Amiya Kumar Das, associated with the Department of Sociology, Tejpur University. Today, in this session, we are going to discuss on the critical theory of the Frankfurt School as developed and contributed by Theodor Adorno. Theodor Adorno is one of the foremost critical thinkers and sociologists who belongs to the Frankfurt School. He developed and stressed the disciplinary boundary and brought various other concepts and ideas from other disciplines. So here he could manage to have diverse disciplinary practices in his own academic intellectual domain, thereby creating in true sense an interdisciplinary or multidisciplinary practices in his academic domain. So Theodor Adorno has a range of work. He was a diverse and multi-talented personality who had grasp over philosophy, aesthetics, music, culture, and other forms of aesthetic practices. So, to begin his discussions and contributions to this Frankfurt School and to the critical theory, we need to know who was Adorno. Theodor Adorno was born in Frankfurt to a wealthy Jewish German family. His father was a wine merchant and mother an accomplished musician from Corsica. His background was steeped in music, art, philosophy, and literature. He was extremely precious and possessed a brilliant intellect. An accomplished musician, he was renowned as one of the foremost interpreters of the great German composer Schoenberg and new music, which posed an aesthetic challenge to contemporary art. He is also renowned for his musical compositions. Adorno studied philosophy with Hans Cornelius and completed his habilitation on the aesthetics of Kierkegaard under the supervision of Paul Tillich in 1931. After working just 2 years as a university instructor, he was expelled by the Nazis along with other professors of Jewish descent or those who espoused leftist political views. He left Germany in the year 1934 and left for United States of America. His works of the period include one of the most prominent works are Dialectic of Enlightenment, Philosophy of New Music, The Authoritarian Personality, Minima Moralia, for which he earned much fame later and are regarded as his representative works. So, we would discuss other contributions and his contributions in this module in the form of Dialectic Enlightenment, Culture Industry, Minima Moralia, and so on and so forth. Horkheimer was one of his most engaged collaborators in the Frankfurt School. So, together they produced many brilliant works. One among them was Dialectic of Enlightenment. To begin with his discussions and contributions to this critical theory as a part of Frankfurt School, we need to understand first what was Dialectic of Enlightenment. So, in the Dialectic of Enlightenment, they argue that this notion of modernity or universalism is not the only thing that which comes automatically. All the progressive things are not attached to it. As it was presented in a more benign form, he argues that there are other externalities which are attached to the benign form of modernity and capitalism. He says this enlightenment is not that progressive. It is having other negative consequences which we cannot see. We give a blind eye to these negative consequences. He says how this modernity along with this capitalism is pervasive. It ruins our culture. It creates the other. It hides all its negativity and make us think in this consumeristic culture that this other are always responsible for all sorts of problems. It hides the uncertainties. In pre-modern time or in pre-capitalist period, the kind of certainties we had, these were killed by this capitalist mode of production or consumeristic market. He argues that in the form of culture industry, that we are made as mere consumption-oriented individual. In the pretext of giving more freedom and liberty and choices, this consumption-oriented market, they capture the individuals. What has happened here in the context of culture industry? He says that culture is made for consumption. This popular culture, these other forms of engagements with the market economy comes in the forms of commodity. So it was projected in the capitalist system which is attached to this modernist agenda that we should consume the products to be more independent individual as a more modern person. In turn, he says that it kills the value of human essence and the part of human being. They create more attitude such as towards this commodity, to the consumption. Thereby, human being, they devalue the others, the neighbors, the other fellow human beings and attach themselves more into the commodity. As in originally context developed by Marx in the context of commodity fetishism, in its context it is argued in a similar fashion that culture become the industry. In the context of culture industry, the human essence is being killed and captured by this modern capitalist system. So when he called this dialectic of enlightenment, the contradiction of enlightenment is seen in terms of when it's supposed to give us value, rationality, logic, ethics. In turn, through this capitalist development and consumeristic approach, it kills the human being and creates one artificial condition where people think that things and commodities are more important than the human lives and human beings. In Minima Moralia, Adorno emphasizes on the exchanges happening in the society. In most of his writings, Adorno has emphasized on the essence of society. Society is the basic element or the core of his analytical procedures, what he has applied in his most of his writings, that society is most important and that too human exchanges happening in the society. So he sees society in the form of exchanges of social values and the social relations which exist in the society. That is the core element of a society according to him. So in Minima Moralia, what he argues that he was saddened by the kind of development happening because of this capitalism. He says due to this consumeristic culture, people were made as inhuman. The society is no more human. It belongs to this various kind of people who were into the consumerism, who were into the kind of capitalist production system whereby they remain inhuman in their practice. Because of this too much of consumption, they forgot the real essence of human beings. So in this context, in the American context, what he saw that it created a different place where people started losing their own character. Love, emotions, these became unimportant for people. Whereas this kind of capitalism, which gave rise to too much of consumption-oriented behavior of human being, these things became more important and people took it very seriously to pursue this consumeristic life. He analyzed from these everyday practices of people by looking at their behavior, how in everyday life that people have degraded their values. It is also one of his major contributions in the form of philosophy of social sciences, where he sees that how human has reduced itself to a very lower grade, which we cannot term it as in real sense as human. In another concept, authoritarian personality, along with other psychological researchers in Berkeley, Adorno developed this concept called authoritarian personality, mostly depending on Freudian sense of analytical tool. They argued that how the killing of Jews by the Nazis in Germany and the example from the Holocaust, they analyzed how a child is having excessive anger towards its father, but it cannot express it because of fear of this punishment. So what he does, instead he creates one personality inside itself to be like him, to be like authoritarian, to be like a kind of dominator. So they give analysis from this authoritarian personality that it might give rise to the fascism or right-wing politics because of this mode of oppression. So in this context, what we see, people create the other. They try to hide their guilt. They try to hide their faults in a society. When they create the other and try to eliminate them, this is the way this authoritarian personality works. So he gives example of this Nazis in Germany and a father, and this analogy he would try to explain that how an authoritarian personality is dangerous for a democratic society. They would try to eliminate and kill who will not fit into their agenda or their schema of life or their scheme of work which they try to pursue in general. In another concept, that is the philosophy of new music, Adorno analyzed this music in relation to the culture of consumption. If we look at Marx's analysis on religion, he says that it is the opium of masses. So people, not only for religion, they are blind to it, but it is they are blind to even this production of capitalist system, and they fall into the trap of religion and capitalism in the same way, and they part of that consumeristic culture. Similarly, for this popular music or new music, for Adorno, is opium of the masses. They think that it is produced for them, it is soothing and good for them, and they fall into the trap. Instead, he argues that it is part of this consumeristic culture or consumeristic agenda where capitalism try to sell its products to the masses, whereby they will forget their sorrow, they will forget their all sorts of pain and get into the world where they will be consumed and captured by this music. So, in his analysis of the culture industry, he says that being a consumer, it is totally inescapable for these consumers of music. He extended his analysis to the dumbling effects of popular music of 1930s and 40s, for an example, jazz and swing music. He examines the works of the composers like Schoenberg and Stravinsky, who are the prime representatives of new genre in Western classical music termed new music. These new innovations grew out of the expressionist movement at the turn of the century and is characterized by atonality and a reinvention of the musical scale. Adorno wrote favorably of Schoenberg's rejection of traditional music, whose soothing, harmonious melodies merely sugar-coated and provided consolation in a social world where relations between human beings were increasingly commodified and dehumanized. Under the sway of late capitalism, music, like all art, had degenerated into decorative and frivolous consumer commodity. Atonal, dissonant new music was more honest to life. It articulated the language of social suffering and resisted the lure of the consumerist capitalist society, or what he termed the totally administrated world. So, in this example of his music or critique to this popular culture in the form of music, he says it is not the music which is giving a kind of relief from the pain of the worker, of the mass, but it has a sugar-coated charm to cater to the people, and it disguises itself from its severity, from its dangerous element, and create itself as a soothing element which can heal the pain of the people. He says it is part of the capitalist agenda. So this is the uh, agony he is having against this consumeristic culture, against the capitalism, and against the culture in the industry, where this mass produced music and all forms of aestheticism which are not per se as a form of practice of art, rather these are part of this capitalistic venture which would have profit, but at the same time it will kill the consumers' imagination and their tastes. As we have seen, this Frankfurt school has been influenced by Karl Marx ideology. Most important aspect of this culture of consumption, culture industry, and other form of analysis what offered by Adorno is having a strong influence of Marx's idea of commodity fetishism. Commodity fetishism, which the people who are this bourgeois, they do not understand the reality where this is produced. Similarly, this consumption oriented culture where the consumers, they are not aware about the kind of labor which is put into the commodity. So commodity fetishism is a concept where we give more importance to the commodity rather than to the human being. So in this context, there are various kind of values attached to a commodity. When we find use value, that is the usability of a product or commodity defines its value. Whereas the exchange value is determined by a form or the thing which is common form, like say money is exchange, medium of exchange of a thing or commodity which is considered as a exchange value. Whereas this value of something which is determined by this socially conditioned labor put into the production of the commodity. That is the value. Apart from the use value and exchange value, we have the value of certain thing is determined according to Marx, this labor theory of value, which suggests that the socially conditioned value which were attached in the commodity during its production. So, a consumer, a bourgeois would not be concerned about this value of a commodity or the kind of labor put into the commodity during its production. So, similarly, Adorno is taking a position while analyzing various kinds of concepts like the dialectic of enlightenment. The dialectic of enlightenment, we have seen how the core concept of liberty, freedom are being defeated in front of this capitalism. Whereas in case of this culture industry, we have seen how culture became part of consumption oriented culture through this music, and it dominates its the consumer. So Adorno developed this critical social theory in response to this dialectic of enlightenment, what he wrote, and other critical essays, and he tried questioning the existing relationship. He says this ill of all or everything is rooted in the capitalist system of production. It creates the differences, the chasm between classes. So the class division of society is the root of all problems, which is again related to this capitalism. He asked that why there is poverty, hunger, underdevelopment, and all kinds of deprivations are still existing in our society, though we have improved, though we have developed in terms of technology and other materialistic form. He says it is only because of this capitalism which is creating all sorts of evil in present day's world. He is very critical about this because he has seen how this human life is being degraded because of this consumeristic culture. He says this mass culture which is created and people have subsumed or surrendered to this culture of music and mass production by saying that it gives them soothing kind of environment, where rather it covers a mask on them to understand the social reality critically. Rather, this kind of mass consumption or mass culture is to continue the status quo. It should it make people like that they cannot question the authority. So under various kind of concept as he developed, like minima moralia, authoritarian personality, culture industry, and other forms of argument he has made, he has clearly shown that how we are in a world which is completely dominated by the consumption oriented world, and it is very difficult for us to come out of the status quo and to understand the real life. Adorno's sociological contributions span the analysis of the disciplines theoretical, empirical, social, critical, and textual dimension. Its relationship with the other objects, debates on exchange society, and sociological studies of individual and social phenomena. As we have discussed earlier, the concept of society was at the core of Adorno's sociology. It is an objective reality which shapes every aspect of the social world as well as nature. It is a relational concept shaped out of the social interactions between individuals that constitute it. The constituent social relations in society are marked by three key aspects. These are social estrangement, social dependence, and social integration. Humans are estranged from each other and their society and are thus unable to recognize themselves in society. Society confronts them as a strange, autonomous object, impenetrable to their understanding, standing as an overwhelming and irresistible reality to which the individual must succumb. So here, this view is similar to Durkheim's understanding of the sui generis nature of society and social facts as things. The world of commodities that the capitalist world has become is thus an estranged world. As a consequence, people live at the mercy of social institutions they neither understand nor are able to engage with nor intervene in their functioning. Social dependence is the dependence of all individuals on the totality that they themselves form. Social integration, hence, is a key idea in the sociology of Adorno. So, we have seen how Adorno is one of the prominent thinkers and main contributors to this critical theory and who belongs to the Frankfurt school of thought. Throughout his life, he critically engaged himself with the whole idea of modernity through various writings. The idea of society and the social were prominent and core to his idea. He has been engaged with the idea of social and this capitalism at various levels. He says that this consumeristic culture has ruined the human essence. They create an environment or through various kind of propaganda and advertisement where they focus and appeals to people by saying that this particular product has been designed in a manner which is only meant for them. It gives a kind of pleasure and it gives a kind of confidence to the consumer to buy this product. Secondly, he is also interested in looking at this popular music and culture as a part of capitalist consumption. Capitalism is inherently related to the state. He looks at it very critically from the Marxist point of view that how the state is also part of this capitalist production system. So, the high mass consumption in terms of commodity or music is a part of capitalist propaganda. It hides the reality and presents something different which is not real to the people. He asked various questions by looking at the failure of enlightenment, modernity, capitalism and modern state by saying that where we have still poverty, hunger and other forms of deprivation, even if we have technology. So, to conclude his analysis and to summarize, we can say that he has been a very serious thinker who is a critic of this modern capitalism, the state, and throughout his writing, he emphasized on the philosophical aspects of everyday life through a sociology which he practiced based on social interaction and social relations. He has also analyzed capitalism through this personal exchange and social relationship with a larger domain. When he went to America and worked with Lagerfeld, he saw while conducting a research or survey on taste of people in radio, he was opposed to the whole idea of quantification, where Lagerfeld is opposed to the idea of Adorno's qualitative approach, where he feels that it lacks methodological rigor. So, in a way, he was for a kind of sociology which is more reflexive and critical. Adorno says that this empirical evidences or the positivist science creates a kind of propaganda or agenda which is based on modern methodological rigor, and it hides the reality, the essence of everyday life, the essence of human society. So, he focuses and emphasizes on the importance of self-reflexivity and critical sociology. He is one of the foremost founders of this school of thought where people emphasize on criticality, critical reflexivity, self-reflexivity, whereby we have to continuously engage with our sociological practice to evolve with more meaningful and productive tool which would help us in realizing the social reality, which is most of the time hidden by this so-called data and quantitative methods. So in his approach, he was very critical, reflexive, and the connoisseur of music. He was a multi-talented personality who had wide range of taste, including in wide range of ability on music, aesthetics, philosophy, culture, critical theory, literature, sociology, so on and so forth. And he was one of the dominant thinkers of the contemporary world, where he has contributed a lot and given us various tools and perspectives to understand critically about the social and sociological reality. So, to understand and know more, please log on to the EPG Pathshala website, where you will have more readings and references. Thank you.